So I don't know how much you have been in the keynote this morning. That's why I try also to explain a little bit what I had there in a brief, short introduction of less than 5 minutes. I just checked the statistics. So our session is the most booked at this moment. If I see now the audience, I don't know where the other guys are, but it's a different story. Okay. Maybe just a small introduction. So myself, MichaelMossal, I'm the CDO of Join, and so I have an IT background. So I was working in the IT sector for plenty of years, running IT business out of Luxembourg, but on European scale. I decided 3 years ago to join a telco. Reason for that is that telcos are actually in the service business for ages. We saw that in the IT business, everything is changing, all the boxes are going away and so on. Everything is going to subscription-based models. And these are what telcos and operators are doing since ages. That was a little bit my motivation to it. And actually, I'm responsible for the entire IT and specifically the IT build and innovation part.
Yeah, so my name is Theobald. I'm the deputy CTO of Join. So at the beginning, I joined Join with Michael. He hired me as an external guy at the beginning of Join, so of this overall journey. Then last year, I did switch over finally really to the more telco-sided land side of our company, but finally in our company, telco and IT is simply the same because they share, in our case, simply the infrastructure. So no matter if it's about the IT level or IP level. And now also, as we are talking about NFV, we simply share the same compute power to run our network.
Good, so let's start. This is when we came to the market in early 2014. So it was with the European message. Roaming is going away. We are the first company with in Europe with a European-based offering. No roaming, European tariff plans. And obviously, different numbers. So it means the portfolio was available in entire Europe from beginning on. But if we onboard a new country, currently we are active in Luxembourg and Belgium, then we get also the Belgium numbers at that moment, for instance. So that's the difference with it. But you can use the offering throughout Europe, and we have also European products which are from beginning on in the European scale level. Good. That platform that we did build, it was a greenfield situation. Was something that was not only built for the project Join, but it was a wholesale platform, so it was an MVNE platform. The aim was from beginning on to build something which was scalable to host other operators on the platform. That's a most important part. Maybe just to explain a little bit where we are, mentioned it also a little bit this morning already. We are part of the POST group, we are result of an initiative that was driven by the Luxembourgish government. Luxembourg known for financial sector, there are some issues, and actually the government was looking in which other areas they should invest. Data centers, fast fiber lines, everything around communication was the outcome of that. So we are one of those initiatives. We are also owned by the Luxembourgish incumbent, Luxembourgish Post, not entirely, but majorly in the meantime. And actually, we just went into the journey that we even made a company split. So what you see here on that slide is Join Infrastructure. This is where we both belong to, and we are serving different tenants. We serve, of course, the Join front part in Luxembourg, in Belgium, but also other tenants, like, for instance, a project that we are doing with Innovos on the energy side, totally different projects. So it's a multi-tenant setup, and in the meantime, also the company structure is related to that multi-tenant setup and the service provider idea of the whole thing. Good. So the most important system that we have is our OSS/BSS system. It's something which for telco means everything that you build with that platform is key, and everything that you provision. So that is something that we did build up with a Chinese vendor, which is called ZTE. Probably some of them, you know them, everyone knows Huawei. So consider this is the second biggest company in China, and China is not a small country. So the entire telco world is currently innovated by Asian companies, and this is one of them. So we have a very tight link to them, so we have direct access to their R&D, and that's basically also explaining the journey from the beginning on, and they also help us to promote that wholesale platform in the European landscape. Good. So that's very important to understand. There are obviously other partners. One of them is VMware. Now, this is not a vendor presentation, so I'm not one of those guys like you have seen already several times here saying, take our OpenStack flavor, we are the best, or we propose you that because we have consultancies to offer in that area. It's not what we are doing. So obviously we use an OpenStack implementation. In our case, it is the one from VMware, and we go later on a little bit more in the area why we really choose that. So that's that part. We try to keep it interactive. If you have any remarks or whatever, just go ahead. So products and brands. So something which is also important from beginning on. So we have different flavors. We have more a kind of a B2B brand. We have a B2C brand, which is this famous banana brand. Now we are in Holland, but in Belgium we would already notice that you have a bunch of TV sports, radio sports, and things like that, that is especially promoting that brand, which is on the level of prepaid, but also very innovative. So linked with a bunch of cloud services behind to build attractive offering. And the latest one is out of the music industry. This is Liquid, a project that we did with Universal Music. So what you see here is this, it's not only telco as such, but it is from the beginning on a platform to provision any kind of subscription-based services. And that's a very important thing when you have to start with, and you have to imagine what additional products could come in the future and what your platform, this is what this talk is all about, has to serve tomorrow. Good. Talking about the platform, I mentioned the most important system, ZTE, Set Smart this is called, and you have then different tenants that you can run on that one. So any new tenant that is coming up means that you get a new instance on that platform, and they get a totally independent environment for their own to provision the service. What is behind that? What we see in the telco industry in the last years is basically that telcos didn't had a lot of challenges over the last years. That started recently with over-the-top services like Skype or whatever it is. So these kind of services who, for the first time, challenged them. There were other challenges, so they added additional services like television or whatever. And that means that it becomes more fragmented, it becomes more siloed, it becomes more complex to manage. And then finally, we have the European roaming regulation. This is something which is eating up their margins because the roaming fees are regulated and they have a cost factor behind which makes it difficult to cope with all that. They are not agile enough to cope with that. So what happened in Luxembourg is that Post Group decided to do that not on its own, but create a spin-off to go to different countries, but also to develop more agile platforms that are difficult to develop if you have a lot of legacy, and then evaluate that and eventually take it back into the own product setup.
Yeah, so one thing to add, 3 years ago we did this overall architecture as an example to run SetSmart on a virtualized environment. And I mean, telcos in here, if the online charging breaks, you can imagine you will have some issues. So people really thought we are a bit crazy that we are doing such things really to run finally the first virtualized telco service, even simply the most important because it's billing, to run it on a virtualized environment. And I must say until now we had really zero outages related to anything on virtualization. So finally it works. It did even work 3 years ago. Yeah,
so it's a very important message. So everything in telco 3 years ago was carrier grade, 5 nines. You don't virtualize. It's something that you don't do in telco. You can maybe do that in the financial sector, but in telco you don't do something like that. So we started not for virtualization. For that it was already at the not at the top of that area. But for telcos we started very early with that aspect. So the BSS system that was mentioned is in the data path. It's real-time billing. If it stops, then everything stops. You cannot call anymore. That was the first part of it. And we did do that because billing is very unpredictable. It means that you launch a marketing campaign and then it's exploding. You have a lot of different changes there behind or whatever, and virtualization is helping in that aspect. We come later on to the OpenStack aspect and how it plays into it. So little bit about the setup. 3 physical data centers in Luxembourg and Belgium. We do a lot of stuff in the open cloud. We always have this SaaS strategy first. Whenever we have to onboard a new service, we try to put it somewhere in the open cloud or whatever. If that is not possible for compliance reasons, for maybe even for financial reasons or whatever, then it will end up in our data center. But we always think public cloud first. So it doesn't mean that we, while building our own cloud, we will use that first. No, there's always someone who does commodity services better than us. So we always go for that. And that's also what we preach to our customers in that sense. So we're using all the major cloud platforms. On the network side, we rent the access network. Obviously in Luxembourg it's Post. In Belgium it's Base. So we always have someone who offers the access network, but the backend network is fully owned by us. So we have a bunch of POPs around Europe. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that topic.
Yeah, I mean, finally we have everywhere, we have every POP we need. As an example, currently we have 2 POPs in Luxembourg, we have 1 POP in Belgium, but our fiber network is also crossing Frankfurt and Amsterdam. Yeah, we have dedicated lambdas everywhere to ensure the quality of service, so to avoid packet switching and prioritization maybe of another element in between. And then finally the backbone is fully end-to-end service aware based on MPLS TE, so also simply to ensure the fast failover on different paths if something is going down, because that's simply key if you have a stretched environment like in our case, because as an example also the part in Belgium is fully controlled, so talking about MSC, talking about connections between MSC and media gateways, also PGW, GGSNs to online charging or PCRF systems. It's really crossing the backbone, and therefore you have to ensure, even in a soft error, you have to ensure a failover within 1 second.
Now, not every one of you is familiar with that telco vocabulary, but what is important to understand is that this has to be highly reliable underneath. So the network as such is something which is our key asset, and to virtualize everything, including the network, means that this is really the highest level of maturity that you need on that level. Otherwise, you have a real issue with your customers. Good, we go on further. So, talking about the data center, coming slowly back to our core data center in Luxembourg. So we have different physical data centers. When we designed it, we had this greenfield situation that is kind of a dream. You say, okay, we don't have legacy, how would you do it perfect? And the first thing that we came up was a layered model, meaning that you have building blocks, you have different layers, and what you see here as layers or whatever, they are all communicating via well-defined interfaces. It doesn't mean it is absolutely impossible that an application has direct access to hardware resources underneath. We didn't allow that. So, and if we extend something, we do that in the building block approach. We know exactly if you're running out of capacity, it is just adding additional compute, it's just adding additional storage capacity or whatever, and all the services on top are benefiting from it. Obviously, you have affinity rules and stuff like that, but in general, every service is floating around under something which is a fully virtualized data center underneath. Good. Mentioned briefly the building blocks, makes no sense to go into details. Obviously, we have somewhere hardware. The hardware is not important at all. Obviously, when we started to build it up, we have been looking at who is the most interesting hardware vendor. There was the price criteria, but there was also the feature criteria of the stuff. So we have EMC storage, for instance. We did, at that moment, already deploy in the architecture a non-shared storage model, so what we called at that time tier 4 storage. Currently, for instance, we're also using VMware as a storage hypervisor for Belgium. We didn't deploy any physical storage there anymore. There's just Cisco plates or whatever with disks in it, and that's it. So hardware, not critical at all, but try to standardize the stuff that you can just move it in or whatever and retire it in a certain life cycle, but don't depend on the service which is on top of it. So, what is obviously important is the hypervisor layer. I was referring, and I will even more referring to a certain vendor independency. if we have something which is not vendor independent, at least not today, then it's the hypervisor as such. So on the network side, but also on the server side. In our case, it's vSphere. Why is it vSphere? Because the vSphere and the NSX platform, at the time when we designed it, was for us the most mature platform on the market. Still believe it is, but it's a different story. It doesn't mean that this is something which is a necessity. It doesn't matter for the concept, but in fact, for us, it is important that this platform which is underneath is something which is entirely stable, and that's a stable platform. So that's basically where we did it. The network part that I mentioned already several times is something that I have to explain a little bit more. So we are running NSX. We are the first telco worldwide 3 years ago who deployed an NSX stack at the core. Why? First of all, there was vendor dependency again, because we had the choice to say, okay, we go the safe bet and go with Cisco or something like that. We have Cisco servers, but we don't have one single Cisco network equipment in our data center. Why? Because we had the OSS BSS engine from the Chinese colleagues, ZTE. We have the telco core from ZTE. And for the IP core, we had to think about it. We should evaluate the risk, what is more risky. Because Chinese IP stack underneath, Chinese switches, can tell you commercially very interesting, 4 times as big as the biggest Cisco, but for a much cheaper price. So how do you compensate, and how do you make sure that you can take that risk? And if you evaluate it in the long time, what does it mean for you? Because going with something which is physical material, like we have seen it here, and automating that, and that was the goal, would be a nightmare. We knew that. So that's why we put this virtual network stack on top of it. And you see the OpenStack model or whatever is for us as an idea from the beginning on there, but we grow from the top to, from the bottom to the top and put additional building blocks side by side there. So network, very important. The intelligence, we moved that totally out of the hardware layer. Everything is in the virtualization layer. On the network side, on the hypervisor side. So we try to have something which is already at the level where we can manage that stuff intelligently. So yeah, capacity, I don't go into the details here. But what is important here, we come to the VIO concept. So that did really allow us to use this software-defined data center concept that we have built also for telco functions. We started with OSS BSS. That was something that we could do on our own with our own risk, but for the rest, it is the industry who decides it. So it was 2 years ago at World Mobile Conference in Barcelona where this story changed, that you don't virtualize in telco. From one moment to the other, the entire telco world says virtualization is great, and we have, by the way, the best OpenStack model for you. So it was really something that was going overnight. Now, that is something which brings us into the situation that we say, okay, our vendor, ZTE, comes and say, look, this is our stack. OpenStack, you get the flavor from us, Chinese, and so on. So this is not what we want. We have a platform, and we want to use that platform and manage workloads from different kinds on one and the same platform. It's one of the key messages for me, because everyone will sell you an OpenStack, and you will end up with 5 of those, and nothing will change at the end. That's our experience, at least in telco. And of course, there's a vendor resistance against it, because when we came to ZTE and said, look, we have that OpenStack, they say, this is not OpenStack, this is VMware or whatever. I said, this is not what you should care about, because what we expect from OpenStack underneath is a set of APIs which are standardized, that you can base your different functions on it. And that's also what at the end happened. And that's for me the key message of the whole story. Good. So,
I think we have to skip some slides because otherwise...
It's too fast. Okay, doesn't matter. So networking, important, and I don't go into details there. Obviously, you build your security setup. And just one message regarding that. So vendor independency on one hand, automation, and then microsegmentation. So the story that you can say, okay, you link security to your service, or to your VM, or whatever it is. Because if you have to manage that thing, the network part and the security part, like in the old days, it becomes a nightmare. If you want to automate that, you also have to change that, and that brings us into NSX. So going a little bit further, M2M, a very important use case. So there, it is much more than just providing a portal and just giving a dedicated APN to a customer, but with such a platform, you can build much more. You can build up a secure environment for your customer where he can run workloads in your data center. There it comes into automating the stuff. And on the opposite side, via UPGW, so via your network, you are able to build them and deliver them a secure environment. And that is something which is quite a big advantage if you go to an M2M project. Don't know, this is windmills or whatever. I think we have here a person from our sales department. It's not about selling VMware or whatever, but he's mainly driving these M2M projects. He can also tell you stories about coffee machines and other stuff. But it's going into a different level than just saying, okay, here you have your cards and a portal to manage them. So we have to speed up the history of NFV. So it's something that I mentioned briefly. 2 years ago, the whole thing started. The telco industry moved a little bit. On the same moment, VMware came out with the first implementation of OpenStack. It was a very early release, I must say, and it was also difficult in the VMware environment to find people to talk to. So we had first the situation that we have on both sides, conflicts that we said also on the VMware side, yes, but we have vCloud Director, these kind of things. So we had to explain them that the telco world is based on standards, and without OpenStack, we would not even be able to talk to our vendors, in that case at the. So that's an important one as well. Good, the first real showcase for that was the IMS system, the system which is handling all the different calls, all the package-related stuff which is going over IP. So we virtualized that stuff, and we also had, due to the fact of that platform, the ability to build it up in Luxembourg and move the virtual machines over to Belgium, because a part of that has to run for compliance reasons or just access reasons on the Belgium side. So it gives us a certain freedom, and it was fully compliant towards what was expected on OpenStack. Good. Mentioned that already briefly, so you see some services which are relying on this one. I mentioned this morning also, if you do a phone call in Belgium, also fixed line phone call, it is going to the entire stack, it is going to the hypervisor itself, it's going to NSX, so it is really something that you can trust on, and all those different services that you can see on the slides, also like Fax or whatever, are using that one and are fully in production on the stack. Good. So why did we choose VIO as a platform? So obviously the hypervisor part or the platform part or whatever had to be reliable, and we already invested in it. I don't want to have another system where I run my SRP on it, which is obviously also virtualized. I'm not so excited about the SRP system, but still, it's not that you build up silos just because you have a new world, and that's basically the primary message in this. Good migration of VMs between countries. So I think I leave the closing up to Ulf. I think you can be as technical as you want. If you have questions or whatever interaction, I think it goes up to an FAQ session at the end.
Yes, so I have now 2 minutes left about to really talk about our IMS journey, so really our virtualized IMS, which is also since last week now fully in production. So we have real active users on top. So finally, why do we choose OpenStack? Simply because of the APIs. And for us, OpenStack is simply, how to say, often hear, oh, I virtualize or I have OpenStack running as an infrastructure. Honestly said, I don't care, because currently OpenStack is not in our signaling path and it's not in our media path. The stuff which is really important are the different components on OpenStack, and also simply the underlying components like the hypervisor, the storage, the network layer, and so on. I will come back to that. Then simply, as said, it's the industry standard currently, and the SDN layer is imposed, because without SDN, simply OpenStack doesn't make sense. Then finally, talking about lessons learned on the VNF infrastructure. So you should really consider the VNFI as a part of your overall system, and you should not ramp up different infrastructures to serve different workloads or to fulfill the needs of different vendors. Simply push them to comply to standards, ask them that they can run really their virtualized network elements on the same infrastructure, because otherwise you will simply, you will have not the benefits you expect from such a virtualized EPC or whatever you want to run on top of such infrastructure. Then for orchestration and so on, forget about heat. You have to use mostly the VNF managers. So also we are talking then finally on vendor logins and so on. I said I have to speed up now a bit. I have 5 seconds left. Also try to avoid at the beginning, try simply to avoid SR-IOV. Even every vendor is really pushing through it. Try to avoid it, especially for, let's say, smaller projects. If you want to introduce dedicated network elements, maybe for a small MVNO and so on, you simply don't need the performance which is provided by SR-IOV. At least test the different power virtualized solutions together with DPDK, because, well, DPDK is mandatory, at least if you want to run the virtualized solutions of the big ones, so the big vendors. Then, that's really most important. You have to be able to operate this environment. So therefore, if your operations feels not comfortable with the fact, as an example, that they have to change something during peak hours on the virtualized infrastructure, something went wrong. It's more like really putting some plates in some chassis than maybe upgrading something. So really, they have to be comfortable really to operate this overall system. Also, you really need forget about the verticals and so on, because as an example, if you have an issue with one-way audio, if you have an issue with packet loss whatsoever, you have to be able to trace it end to end. So yeah, you really need the people on one hand which do understand telco, but on the other hand which do also understand the bridge in between. So that's really important. People which will finally recover the network, let's say something is going entirely wrong, they have to participate in this project, because someone, really a group of people which do understand the system end to end, they must participate to this project, and also therefore babysitting is key, and there are simply different methodologies and so on needed to hand over such a project. Then also very important, if you're using DPDK, forget about simple diagnosis on a Linux level like easy TCP dump, because it doesn't exist in this way, because it's simply on the application level. Yeah, and then why you have to test unusual scenarios, just a short story, mostly that you have a briefing network, a briefing virtualized network element. You have to deploy, as an example, more compute power on the fly. So that means you have some front-end boards and you have some back-end boards really with the compute power. So now what happens, or you should think about what happens if the connection in between fails or partially fails. How to diagnose it. How to do the diagnosis, because sometimes it's simply not possible. It's not possible sometimes because there is no packet capture, there are sometimes no performance indicators, really test such things and push the different vendors to provide the right capabilities.
I have to cut you off.
Yes, if you have additional questions really in detail, just ask or after the session.
Yes, I was hearing the gong going outside, so people are starting to switch rooms. So we will now have a technical session in room number 9 on VMware, the deep dive, so that we go for the technical stuff. You guys going to be around. If people have questions, look them up. I think you will be after the technical session of VMware shortly at our booth for questions and answers. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the show.